John said he's trying, but he's having internet issues also. So I sent him the call-in number as well. Oh. All right, we're live.
Okay, I sent out an agenda yesterday just to kind of guide us through the conversation. The first thing we wanted to talk about was the $100,000 capital outlay project for 2020-2021. John and I have been working with Scott and also Rick Shaw from BOCES to work on the necessary asbestos testing to get the design for that project worked on. Larry today signed the form that needs to go to New York State Ed to get a project number assigned, and I'll send that in on Friday when I'm back in the office. Scott, I don't know if you want to chime in and touch base about next steps and timeline and what we're thinking as far as
that. Sure. I wanted to introduce Kyle Smith. Kyle works out of our Saratoga office, and Kyle is helping me on the $100,000 project. So we've been working on that, and I'll let him speak a little bit about where we are status-wise, just to give everybody an update.
Yeah, so last week I went out on site with John, and I did my own field measurements and saw the rooms. I also met with BOCES and reviewed the scope. We received test results today. And a quick look at it, it looks like the floor does have asbestos containing materials, which is what we thought. But it looks like good news, the ceilings did not. So that's going to be saving some money there. And I certainly had some questions with BOCES on some of that, but that's some good news right now already. But we are looking, as of today also, we asked ATL for an update on their design proposal for asbestos removal design, now that they're not doing testing. And they did confirm that they could meet the SED submission date that I assigned to the team on April 28th. So we're trying to do a pretty aggressive schedule now that we have the test results back and try to get it up to SED as soon as possible.
And just so everyone knows, SED is only accepting electronic submissions now, which is a little different than what they've done in the past. But we're going to submit that way. Once we get the project into SED, then obviously the wait begins for them to review it. Now, this is a pretty straightforward project. Obviously, it's flooring and some ceiling work. So we're hoping that it can get through there, but quickly. But we're really at their mercy, and things have slowed down a little bit based on all this that we're going through. Once we thought the best thing to do would be to get it in there, have a conversation with your SED project manager, and see how fast we can get it through there. But we'll keep you posted on that. So we're trying to hit obviously we'd love to hit the summer schedule. Now, I will mention a couple of things on the schedule and just some thoughts about that Kyle and I have had. If, for example, if we cannot hit the summer schedule based on how long it takes SED to review it, one of the things we would want to think about is, because it's a 100K project, you have to have the project completed within 1 year of approval. So July of 2021, you'd want to have the project completely done. As there's only some floor tile removal that is asbestos containing, one thought we had was, as a fallback position, could we potentially get into those rooms over Christmas break and do the abatement? It's not going to take very long because it's only the small amount of rooms. Do the asbestos abatement over the Christmas break when students were not in the building, or mostly not in the building. Obviously, you've got some games and things going on, but for the most part, not in the building. And then put the floor tile back, start putting the floor tile back through the remainder of the break. And if that goes out into January, a few weeks, could the band and choral do their classes on the stage, for example, for a few weeks in January? And that might be something, we might not have an answer on that now, but it's something to think about as a fallback position if we cannot get the work done this summer. But I just wanted to bring that out to everybody and make everybody aware of that, and let you start thinking about that a little bit, because potentially that could be our scenario if we cannot get SED approval in time. The other issue to consider as well is if we get SED approval in, let's say, June, and we go out to bid, we are likely to see some higher prices than if we bid it in late fall, for example, just because of the fact that contractors are busy. School contractors especially are busy in June, July, and August, and most of them have all their work already lined up. And so that's a possibility. And if we get approval, I think we should certainly try and go out and get those bids, but we may see higher numbers. If they're within our budget, that's great. We can continue with the plan and get it done. But I just want to get all the cards out on the table so everybody understands what the possibilities and options are.
Just a couple things that I want to add. Just as a reminder, we're incurring some of these planning costs up front, and the district's bearing the full cost as not as part of the $100,000 project, because we wanted to get preliminary work done so we could potentially do the project in July. BOCES being involved is new, but John was able to coordinate with Rick Shaw, and they determined that BOCES could do the asbestos testing for us as part of the BOCES service. So it cost us $150 through BOCES to do that testing, as opposed to a much higher price through Atlantic Testing. So it was great that John was able to coordinate that with Rick, and we were able to, with Scott's help, rework things with Atlantic Testing. So they'll still do the design for the project for the abatement, but we didn't have to engage them to do the testing. There was something else, but it escaped my. John and Scott and I talked earlier this week, and one of the things we plan to do when we do put this out to bid is to put an alternate ad in the bid for some better quality flooring material that John likes better, because you don't have to wax it as often. So in a room like the music room where there's a lot of equipment and the risers, it's a more expensive flooring, but it's easier to maintain because you don't have to do all that waxing and things. So we were going to bid that as an alternate ad. Depending on where the pricing came in, we could possibly upgrade the material to something that's more desirable.
Didn't we take a look at that at the last time we met too, or talked about that issue?
Yeah, we talked about it. Yep.
I think that's pretty much it on the capital outlay project, unless there's any questions.
Just a thought for you on the capital outlay. If we're going to bid, why don't we bid a better material right from the get-go? And then if we don't like the prices on the bidding, just not accept the bids?
Well, typically, I mean, we could do the alternate two ways. I mean, you would either bid, your base bid would be vinyl tile floor, and you could do an ad alternate for the more expensive floor. Or you could do it the other way, which is your expensive floor, more expensive floor is the base bid, and you do a deduct alternate for vinyl tile. It's kind of, you're going to get similar numbers, but we could do it either way, really.
My only thought is I would hate to just bid it for the more expensive tile and have it come in higher than we could go forward through, and then we have to go back to square one. I'd rather give us some options to work with. Either decide that we want to go forward with the project with a lesser quality tile, as opposed to having to scrap the whole project and start over.
Yeah, I mean, you want to have both options at bid time to give yourself some flexibility. Because if you don't have that alternate, and for example, that flooring comes in higher and could jeopardize the whole project, you want to be able to have the ability to look at a lesser expensive option. I personally, I would probably lean towards going with the vinyl tile, the lesser expensive flooring as base bid, and then do an add alternate to go to the upper, the slightly better product. Just because typically on deduct alternates, you might not see as much of a savings on a deduct as you would the other way around. So that would be my thoughts on that, but we can certainly do it any way the district wants to do it.
Scott, should we also consider doing the classrooms as an alternate add, so that if it came in, if we didn't want to get an inferior product, we wanted to get the best product in the music rooms, couldn't afford to do the whole project. If the classrooms were as an alternate add, we could cut that piece out and still do the higher quality stuff in the music room.
The special ed classroom, you're saying, make that an alternate?
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly could, and that might not be a bad idea, just from a, just to give yourself as much flexibility as possible. The project is pretty narrow in scope, and really you have the music suite, and then you have that classroom. So those are the two things you're looking at. So that would be easy enough to do. But I think I would still do a flooring alternate just to see what the prices are. But then you could do the same thing for the classroom. You could make that the work at the classroom an alternate, and have the subset of the types of flooring as well. It's easy enough to do at bid time. It's harder to do after the fact.
I agree with going out in a bid for an alternate. I just think it would save the time of having to rebid everything as well.
Yep.
If you don't like the price of the, the higher priced, material, then having to go back out. I think if we did it all at one time as an alternate, then we have the option.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott, with that, because I'm not familiar or used to having the bids that have that much flexibility in them. That's what makes me cautious, so that we don't get a completely subpar material than we're after. So with this, do you have to bid just the type of material, or do you have to bid brand specific and that type of thing? Just the reason I'm asking, because I'm used to, if I want something a certain way and I'm not going to be stuck by just price, I've got to make sure I bid it in exact detail. Is the wheelhouse I'm used to working in, and that's why
Well, you have to bid the New York State bid law. You have to bid products that are, you can base it around a product, but you also have to say, have alternate products that are equal to it. So you have to have equivalent products, and there are equivalent products for these types of flooring. So you would just we would spell that out in the alternate, what we're looking for. Here's what the alternate, they'd like to look at this type of flooring by this manufacturer, this style, this model, and or an equivalent product to that. And we typically would give some examples of what equivalent products would be. We have to do that per New York State. That's the way you do it. And I would mention that with these, 100K projects, I think it's good to have alternates in them because, I've done several of them last year, and what I've seen, and Kyle, you could probably chime in on this too, the smaller projects like that, even though it's $100,000, they're not as attractive a lot of times to contractors because they're looking for the bigger projects. And so you don't see, you don't see 10 bidders bidding on a 100K project. You'll see 1 or 2 or 3 will bid on it. Last year, a product, I was working over in Morris Central Schools, and they had flooring in that project, and they ended up having to take some of the flooring out just because it came in, they got one bidder, and it came in higher than expected for the carpeting that they wanted to replace. And they said, well, we want to continue, so we'll take that carpeting out and we'll do the rest of the flooring. So you want to have some flexibility, I think, in your bids, and the alternates allow you to do that.
Okay.
Do you break down your bidding by line items and then have approval on each line item to give you further flexibility under your bid specs? So in other words, floor prep one way versus floor prep another?
No, typically not. We ask for the scope of work is identified on the drawings and in the specifications, and then you're asked for a base bid price, and then here's the alternates, and you explain out what the alternates are. But we typically don't do line item by line item.
So in other words, could you take the classrooms and have the classrooms a separate line item to break them out away from the music area, for example?
Well, that's essentially what we would be doing if we made the classroom an alternate. You would know exactly what the classroom cost.
Okay, so you, instead of doing it by line item, you're going to do it as alternates.
Yes.
You're going to do a base bid of basically the music room, and then add alternate, which would be the other rooms, and then add alternate upgrade in materials.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's pretty much standard. I didn't know you had to offer an approved equivalent in the bid. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the approved equivalent, I thought, just fell back on the engineers. I didn't know you had to give another like make, model, type.
Well, you don't have to, but a lot of times we will do that because we want to get as close of an equivalent as possible. So giving the contractor some suggestions as here's a few materials that are very, very similar to each other. Why don't you use one of these? That gives them a little bit of flexibility when they're bidding it.
Okay. Thank you.
As opposed to them just, go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
It's a performance-based specification. So the product you guys use is affordable marmoleum, it's called, which is just linoleum. That superior product that you guys are putting down is linoleum, but it has a topping coating on it that you don't have to wax. So we would specify, and I will specify around marmoleum with equals that are linoleum with a top coat from other manufacturers.
Yeah.
That's how that would work.
Okay, are we all good on capital outlay? All right. The next thing we had to talk about was the large capital project. I had emailed out yesterday the most recent after BCA's visit on site design proposal for the parking and the paving work. I know Tracy had given some responses to that and with some questions or concerns about it, and I think Scott is prepared to talk about those, but just kind of wanted to get everybody back to where we were and see if that's the design we want to move forward with. Or if, and again, I think as Scott has mentioned before, there may be some, even though we go out to the public with here's the concept, as we get into planning and designing the project, there may be small changes, but is this a concept we're comfortable moving forward with?
Yeah, and I think that kind of sums it up. Oh, I thought it was muted, sorry. So that sums it up. Yeah, this, the option 4, which was the last, I think that's what you attached in your email to everyone. That was the latest concept that was put in there. And I know there was some questions about, there was a few things that were brought up as questions. And, I looked over, like Tracy had several questions on that. And we can go through those one by one if you'd like. I think typically what happens is you go out with a concept to the public and you say, this is our concept, this is what we plan to do. And once you get into the design process, you may tweak a couple of things. You may decide, oh, we're going to move this to the left or whatever, change a couple of things. That's fairly typical. I just didn't know how much farther the committee wanted to go with the actual design of this concept. Were there tweaks, changes that still needed to be done before we were ready to show it publicly? I know there were several questions about it.
For me, from what I've seen of the design, I like the layout of it for the most part.
Was the design, like I had questioned, were we looking at having the parent drop off at the rear parking lot? I remember Graydon in one of the meetings had said, we wanted to move it back there. Is that what that design was for the parent drop off to be in that rear parking lot?
Yes. So on that, I don't know if can I share my screen here? I think I can. Let me see if I can pull up that drawing.
If you can't stop, I can.
Yeah, I think I got it here. Hang on. Maybe not. Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
You can see it.
Yep.
Okay. Can you see my crosshair cursor here?
Yep.
So we had listed parent lane. So the concept was parents would come, and this is instead of right now you have parking along here, but this would be a sidewalk. So parents could stack up along this sidewalk, one-way traffic here, drop off, and then circle back and go back out the site. And that would keep it separate from the bus loop, which is along the front of the building here.
Right. Well, like I put in my paper, my only concern is we're putting that drop off and further away from the front of the school than where it is right now. Mm-hmm. And they're following basically the same route to get back there. And they're going to be going by the same area that they're dropping off now. My concern is the parents are still going to stop where they're stopping right now to drop their kids off to let them go. That's just what I see as normal progression of a parent, going to a new spot. Well, we're going right by our old spot. We'll just drop off here and then continue around the loop. In the afternoon, however, I mean, that's a lot better, deal than what we have now, because they will be able to stack up around there to pick up. Mm-hmm. But that was just something that come to mind when we were looking at it. I mean, we're pushing it further away from the front for the student drop off, and in bad weather, they're not going to want to go out there to get dropped off to walk further to the front to get in.
I think it's going to be an enforcement issue on the school's part.
Right. Right. I was going to just say that I think that some of that's going to have to be enforcement, and then also, some of those things and can be talked about in newsletters and trying to train the parents a little bit, and we all know how well that works sometimes, but we can try to do that. And there'll be new signage, of course, and things to try to direct people. It's going to take some different getting used to. It is different. It's new. You've been doing things, the same way for a long time. So it will take some training for sure. And it would be helpful, I think, initially, especially the first few weeks that this is in place after it's constructed, is probably having some district personnel that were out there sort of directing traffic if somebody decides to stop and park where they're not supposed to.
Well, the other part that I looked at, and again, we'll have to figure out how we're going to do it, but at that three-way stop, if the parents are allowed to make a right, which they can then go into that new parking area. Yeah. I think a ton of them will utilize that, stop at the crosswalk areas, let their kids off. So then they go into the school right in front of it at the crosswalk areas, and then continue out and go down Maple Street.
Especially
that's something that we're looking at allowing that to happen. But if it is open for them to go that way, I'm sure a lot of them will end up going that way.
I was thinking that, Tracy, especially for the middle school, they would probably do that. Maybe not quite so much for the high school.
Right.
I would think that one of the things you might want to consider doing there is either not allowing traffic for certain periods of time to turn right at that stop sign, whether that's through signage or whether through that's a physical, barrier of some kind, but stopping traffic from turning right from, say, whatever the times are, 2:55 to 3:15 or something like that. You can't go right. You can only go straight. Once again, I think that's going to be an enforcement issue. How do you want to do that?
Well, that's what we find out now is we have signage for no people to be up there at certain times, but unless you have someone standing there, they're still there. They're still in those areas. Like right in front of the school, you know, their signage is close to the public for X amount of time. They're still there. I mean, in the past, we have had people at the entrances to stop people so they couldn't go there. But again, that it come down to budget issues with extra people and managing that. Signage in theory is always a good thing, but I mean, the reality is people still go because there's no one there to stop them. But
so something that my last project was in Gloversville, and it was about $7 million of site work. And we did 2 schools with parent drop-off and buses. And there is always a challenge with mixing of kids and buses and parents. Something we used was vehicle lift gates. And being the project, it was a powered lift gate. And then towards the end, it was just a manual lift gate that the district went out and then shut it so that parents could not take a right into the bus lanes. And then that person would go out later and then open it because the buses aren't there for very long.
right.
But that was an option.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we either have some sort of, we potentially could put some sort of physical barrier right where my cursor is. That's either a manual type of thing that's put out for 20 minutes or a half an hour twice a day, or you could even have an automatic type of gate that closes down to sort of stop traffic from going through there. Short of doing something like that, I think you're right. I mean, there are some people that are going to always say, I'm going there, you know, I'm going to turn there. So
I was thinking along that line too of an automated gate system here that was a do not enter on it. Do you have any idea what they even cost?
I can't give you a real quote. I know that the district, they had 13 gates at one school. So they did switch them to manual swing arms and they've been happy with them. So no one gets through the manual swing arms. So they put them out, they got the signage and it locks down that bus lane and then they open them back up and then traffic flows.
You could certainly just make it part of the duty of somebody who's on during that time to go out at a certain time of day and close that and then open it up afterwards.
yeah, and it doesn't, the beauty of that is if you're closing just that one lane from people turning right, people that are parked back here, it still gives 2 ways out of that parking area because they could come out because they'll be in front of the buses. And I know, Tracy, that was one issue that you said, you know, okay, we're parking buses a little farther back than what we currently are. And you are, they're back a little bit further, but that does give some stacking room here at this stop sign for people to come out, which I think we really want. You do want that.
I think that swing arm is an easy fix to that, you know, that problem there.
I do too. Yeah, I agree.
I would just, and it's all, again, like you said, signage and workage and how you're going to do it. But I mean, especially in the afternoon, that parking lot at that end, I just wouldn't think that we'd want all of those coming out that way to mix in with the buses right there. That's the one thing we're trying to separate, because if they get backed up in there, they're set my buses not even being able to go because they're all ahead of the buses and they could be bumper to bumper right out through there. And here we sit for an extra, 10 or 15 minutes in front of the school.
Yeah, I think I would certainly encourage people to go the other direction, to leave. And I don't know how, maybe we do that through signage. And once again, you have signage, you potentially could have signage right here that says, do not enter from,
right,
such and such a time.
Well, if you're going to use swing gates, you could almost use 2 of them.
Right.
You could, yeah. The only concern I would have with that here, having a swing gate closing this down, is let's say somebody did start coming down this way and then they get down here and they can't go out. So now they're faced with a situation of, do I try to back into a space, or is there even a space there that I can back into to turn around? You don't want to force somebody in a car to be backing up when the kids are exiting the building.
Scott,
So where your cursor is going to be a 2-lane entrance, right?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Right where you had the cursor there going into the parking lot would be a 2-lane. So if a swing gate blocked just the exit lane, worst case scenario is they could go out in the wrong lane, go around the swing gate, because the other gate would be closed at the same time, stopping traffic coming off the main drive and turning right.
That's true. Yep.
So when you're stopping traffic there from the previous experience, I mean, how long does it take for the buses to get out of there? I mean, people are going to be queued for, which could seem a long time for a parent, 10 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
They come. Yeah, I mean, and also from my experience, when a parent gets stopped at a queue point, they don't go back there.
Right.
Like if they stop at a swing gate and they sit there for 10 minutes and they get upset, they're not going back there next time. Or they know to switch the pickup time up a little bit. It's like a learning experience again.
Right. But we could certainly look at that. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to add another swing gate there just to stop that behavior.
I remember early on, Tracy talked about entering that parking lot by itself and creating an extra intersection there. Is there any value in getting rid of swing gates and just doing that? Where your cursor sits now?
Coming out here?
Yes.
I don't think so, personally, because now you've got an exit coming out where you're trying to stop people here at this 3-way. I think it becomes very, I mean, we certainly could look at that, but
I think the only reason why it made sense to me was it gives you a bus only lane where there's no reason for a car to be there. And it gets rid of swing gates. It gets rid of everything else too.
But if somebody drives up in here during the day, they're still going to come out this way. You're saying to physically...
They would, but that period of time, you would only have to keep in place what we do now, which is no vehicles other than buses. It seems to work pretty well. I think it does anyway. Uh-oh.
You're saying to bring that straight through
that parking lot, or if we were talking with signage without being able to come in off of 206 up the main drive and being able to turn right in there, all of the traffic is going to be coming off of Maple Street, pointing that way, of any cars that go there to pick up any kids in the afternoon. So they have to come out this end unless they turn around.
I do think that the easier you make it to enter this from this direction, that's where people are going to be trying to drop off their kids, because it's in front of the school.
Right.
I think if you force them to come to a stop and then you have a swing gate here, it forces them to go back the way you want them to go, as opposed to easily turning right into this parking area.
I think I would almost try to look to let traffic go back towards Maple Street versus the second entrance off that parking lot, because that's just more to plow, more to snow removal and things too. Personally, I'm a fan of that 3-way stop right there. If you keep traffic into that, you're going to control it a lot better than the more avenues we give them to up there to maneuver. And my memory serves me correct, we were trying to figure that the staff and students would be parking out in the front parking lot. So the parking in the rear should really be overflow and student pickup. So,
correct.
We wouldn't have the students leaving that back parking lot too. We would just have student pickup and drop off leaving that back parking lot during the school day. Nothing we do is going to be 100%, I don't think. That's for sure.
I agree with you, Kevin. I think the swing arms there would really help control that intersection there and force the parents to drop off where they should be dropping off in a safe location.
So are we comfortable using this design, knowing that it, moving forward with this as the concept, knowing that there might be some alterations, be it a gate, things like that as we refine it?
We could add notations about the swing arm gates to this drawing, if that would be helpful.
I would prefer that you made the notations to it personally. And honestly, that's just my own conceptual designs and going to bid on conceptual stuff. I'm just not used to that in my area. I mean, it just so that kind of makes me nervous from the get-go. I get where you're coming from, but I'm just used to having things every I dot and T cross basically, so you know exactly what the work is and what the. But
so you want to
like
eliminate all those change orders?
Eliminate what?
That's just kind of,
I said Kevin wants to eliminate all those change orders.
Exactly.
Kevin's not the only.
I like that idea.
We put them out on an engineered design, and that engineered design gets built too. So it's a totally different ballgame doing it this way.
Well, Scott, I don't want to speak for you, but can we guarantee no change orders during the referendum vote?
During the referendum vote, I think we can guarantee no change orders. Yes, I think we can do that.
As long as no contractors vote.
That's right. Right.
At least they vote yes.
Okay, so with that notation about the lift gate, we're going to kind of put a pin in this design for the time being. Okay.
I'm good with it.
The only thing I just want to comment, the only thing it lacks that I remember talking about way back, and I'm not sure if Rhonda brought it up or who, but in the middle of the the drop-off parking lot was there ability to put a sidewalk down the center of that so that if they did park on one side of the parking lot that they could be able to walk that. That's the only piece I don't see. And maybe it's not necessary. I don't know.
I think we showed that as being concrete. I think this is, yeah, that's.
There it is, huh?
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
Where are you at? I can't see.
Right. If I zoom in, can you see it now? That's shown as concrete.
Okay, so that is the walkway right there?
Yep.
Okay, so the other lane is just a lot more bold than that. Okay, good.
Yeah, this is wider. Yep.
All right.
So again,
Okay, so that being a walkway down the center, they would go to one end or the other. And I'm assuming that our striped crosswalk.
Yeah, I think we would probably want to show a crosswalk maybe here.
Right. Yeah.
And possibly even here.
I'd go both sides because you got the high school kids will be going into that B wing. So yeah.
Right.
Good.
and just to recap, I sent it out with the email, but this project with Townsend is $5,750,000, and without Townsend flood mitigation is $4,614,000. Just to get an idea of a little bit.
You know, I'm going to try to stop sharing here, see if I can do that.
One thing before we leave the design quickly, I know there was talk about whether or not to do soil borings early so that we were comfortable that the front bank could support that additional parking and lot. Scott got an estimate for those soil borings, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think it was $10,000, $12,000.
Yeah, we were estimating that that's what it would be. That would be the range.
So we could make the decision to go ahead and do that now, and that cost would be borne by the district. It could become part of the project if the project moves forward, correct, Scott?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the way I had explained to Meg is typically we would do soil borings and things like that after the referendum because most districts don't want to bear that cost up front. They want it to be part of the project costs so that you get building aid on that as well. We're very confident that, you know, we're not looking at doing anything here that is, you know, a concern to us as far as bringing Phil in and making this all work. So, but I told Meg that, you know, it's certainly a district decision. If the district is more comfortable in doing, having the soil borings beforehand, that's fine. But typically we would see them done after the vote.
So I wanted to get a sense of the committee, what you all thought about doing them now or postponing that.
So Scott, the question for you, when this goes out to the contractor for bid, do contractors want that boring before they bid on it?
Yeah, so the soil borings will be all part of the specifications. So all the testing, the pre-testing that's done is included in the specifications so that the contractors can see that beforehand. Or during the bidding process, I should say.
Right. So, okay, so they're not having any gray area. They know exactly what they're bidding on.
That's correct.
So we would do it before the bid, just not before the vote.
Correct. Yeah, we would do that early on because as soon as once the vote is approved, then the next steps would be surveying that area and getting the exact grading and everything. And then we would do our geotechnical testing, do all the borings back there, get all that information because we need all of that information to do the final design documents. But that would typically happen right after the vote.
And Scott, you're still looking at a wall potentially to hold that fill up, or you're going with the grass slope?
I think what we're looking at right now is a grass slope.
Yeah, I think when Kevin and I walked, it looked like it was going to get tight. But and the other question I have is, Meg, on this, our local cost share on this, Meg, is going to pencil out to like 650,000 maybe.
I didn't have it calculated as total.
What's our building aid?
84, I think. Christine, can you help me?
It's right in there.
I'm pulling the schedule up quickly. Yes, 83.8% is your building aid ratio.
So if you take it without Townsend and assume 16%, it's 740.
So we're around 650,000, I think.
How are you getting? Great.
I did. Sorry, everybody was kind of cutting out. This is Christine. Can everybody hear me for a sec?
Yes.
So, okay. So I just, not to interrupt, because I think it was Grayson cut out a little bit, but I did run the numbers based on no Townsend work and to see where we would come out, and that was on the 4,614,000. And you can do the project at the 4,614,000 with no capital reserve and remain tax neutral.
With no capital.
So I know that was. Go ahead.
You said no capital reserve?
No contribution from the capital reserve. So being able to keep our 500,000 there.
Exactly correct.
So basically what Christine is saying is we've talked in the budget meetings about keeping our debt service flat because we have some debt service this year. And what she's saying is that the debt service we're keeping in the budget would cover the debt service on this project without Townsend, without having to do any additional increase to the budget. Or pay up front out of the capital reserve.
We just, right. For clarification, we just put 500,000 in the capital reserve project, right?
Yeah.
So not utilizing any of that keeps us dead flat.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up
That's good news.
That's surprising.
There was a little bit of
Meg, you're cutting out.
Christine, what did you have for annual additional debt service on the project?
On the project, let me see here. Average annual debt service is approximately about 380,000 as an average.
And how much of that would be in building aid?
So, and then 305 in building aid, almost 306. So if you talk local share, you're approximately $80,000 local share, 75 to 80,000 from year to year.
Okay, and we might have to look at that because I know I sent you the numbers, but I was thinking it was only about 50 excess that I had in debt service, keeping it flat.
For the first few years, you're right, Meg. So this year we used as the base year, and you had about 127,000, just for a round number, of tax levy related to capital projects. And when we add in the new project, the first year, 2021, we did keep debt service down so that you're at that 127,000 or so. And then it goes down to 126, up to 129, down to 125, up to 128, and then drops after because more debt is falling off in the 2029-30 fiscal year. So we are staying at that about 127,000 when we look at everything that's outstanding right now, plus this current project that you're looking at. And I don't know if you have your emails. So the schedule I sent on March 13th would show you that, Meg?
Yes, I'm looking at that one.
If you didn't mind, if you wouldn't mind sharing that back around again, I thought those were very intriguing.
Let me try sharing my screen.
I didn't think we'd ever be able to get to that point with that big of a number.
Yeah. Well, Grayson, originally I had a smaller local share number for capital, and when Meg was doing this year's budget, we were looking at that, and she was carrying a higher number, and so we have a higher base number, if you will, than what I had originally anticipated the district was carrying. So that's why we reconciled this year how Meg was building her budget, and it turned out to that 127 and change.
So Christine, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Yep.
So roughly the middle column shows tax levy of the proposed project. So that is, correct me if I'm wrong, the amount that we would need in addition to the state aid we would get that year to cover the debt service that year for the project.
Exactly correct. So
the 53,750 that you see for 2021 is about exactly how much I kept in the budget for next year to keep the debt service flat. So then
exactly right.
I guess where I'm confused is in the years after that, when you get to 64 and 109 and then the 90s and the 70s, how is it not requiring additional tax levy in those years to cover those increased amounts when I've only got maintained in the budget?
So because if you go to the first column after the fiscal year, the one that's called tax levy prior to proposed project, if you see in 23-24, the existing debt, you have a drop. So it goes from, in 22-23, you're carrying about 65,000 for the existing debt. Excuse me, 22-23, you're carrying 65, and then 23-24, it only drops down, or it drops down to 19,809. So that difference there, you don't need any more for the existing debt because that's retiring, and so that can be applied to the tax levy of the proposed project, keeping you at the 129 for that particular year.
So really what we're looking at is the column after that says tax levy after proposed project, and we see that the tax levy required to meet our debt after building aid is right, it stays in the 127, 125, 129.
Right, that's everything rolled into one, that column, yeah.
But what this does, correct me if I'm wrong, is it takes into account and uses up some of that next maturing, the next time that we were looking at some debt service falling off. It's eating into some of that when we were talking about being able to fund another project at that point in time.
That's correct, because now you're pushing that off to 28, 29, 30, 29, 30.
Which really, if you think about it, if this project happens, it's not going to happen until, I mean, where have we got it in our timeline? Like 22, 23 to actually be done?
Right.
To then plan
And
for and have another project in 5 years is probably not that unreasonable.
Right. And keep in mind, this option is not using your capital reserve. So, you know, let's say you move forward with this option, you still have that $500,000 of capital reserve that you could leverage for a project in between this proposed project we're talking about today and when we have the next drop off, which is that 2930.
Okay.
And of course, if there's any additional that you put in the capital reserve, that could be leveraged as well if the district chose to.
Does that answer your question, Graydon?
Yeah, that looks very clear to me.
Okay. So the next real big thing I think that we need to talk about is Townsend flood mitigation. I know we've talked about this. We've talked about the CWC funding and how that plays into our local share for a larger project. And also it's been said that if we didn't get this funded, we weren't gonna do the Townsend flood mitigation if it was costing the district money. So in January, we had a conference call with CWC and the state. And the way that we left that conference call was that we were going to submit a legal opinion to state ed, facilities planning, about how we thought the local share would be should be treated, the CWC funding. And they were going to get their legal opinion on it so that we had a definitive answer. I've had a lot of trouble moving that forward. Bob Schofield has been very hard to nail down on getting that process moving. And in addition, Scott told me yesterday that the 2 individuals that we were dealing with at State Ed are retiring this month, I think you said, Scott. So we're really at a point that we need to decide whether we want to keep pushing this or if we just want to, how we want to handle the Townsend flood mitigation and the CWC funding piece.
Why is Bob Schofield why is he not picking this up and running with it?
I have made phone calls. I have sent emails. I think Larry has pursued that too. He promised it to me on February 15th. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to reach out to him. I did at one point have some interaction with him, and he said he was trying to get some more detail from State Ed from the letter. And for the most part, he's non-responsive to me.
Meg, just a reminder, your screen is still up.
Thanks.
I think we just need to collectively get together and ask Bob what the delay is, you know, and see if we can get him off base there. If we just need to trade opinions to get this wrapped up, I think we should continue down that path. It's not costing us anything at this point.
I'm happy to pursue that, but I'm not sure what else I can do.
Little help, Larry?
Well, Larry's been helping. You know, maybe we need to, maybe all 3 of us, Meg and myself and Rhonda representing the board, maybe all 3 of us need to get on this one. And maybe all come and sit in my office and make a call together so that he can hear all of our voices and let him know how important this is for us to get some sort of resolution on this. Yeah, Meg has gone after it and I've gone after it too, but maybe by adding that other element, maybe that will be helpful.
Don't we have a meeting with him coming up in regards to potential contract with a new superintendent?
I don't remember what that date is offhand, Kevin.
Okay. I was just thinking why he's in the room at the board table to probably beat him on this topic.
Yeah, there's an opportunity there.
Exactly. I would definitely like to see us reach out again to him, and you know, and then if we have to, not being politically correct, swing a bigger stick when we have them all in the same room, we'll first see if we can't get more going on this, because I'm with Greg, and I'd like to see this thing go through. I think we ought to pursue it until they tell us flat out no.
I'd like those two people who are retiring to give us a present as they go out the door.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Maybe their present will be them leaving and someone else chiming in.
That could very well be too. So and I don't know. And if that was one of the other thoughts I had too, is Bob taking his time potentially for that exact reason? Does he know who's going to fill their shoes, or has he heard through the grapevine who's going to, and maybe that'd be an easier, but I'd like to have him at least give us some straight, you know, if there's a reason he's dragging his feet, let us know if there's a reason he's dragging his feet.
And typically, Kevin, on other issues, if that's the case, he has confided in me in the past and said, you know, I'm just going to go slow on this because of thus and so, you know, okay. And but I haven't got any of that kind of information from him as yet.
Just so I understand, Meg, their CWC and their opinion is waiting on ours first, correct?
Well, they use an attorney at the same firm as them, and they were going to coordinate, and their attorney had, you know,
I can't hear you.
CWC's attorney and Bob's attorney are at the same firm.
Okay.
And they were going to coordinate on this response. Bob really felt that he needed to take the lead on it. That was the impression that I got, and I was fine with that. CWC is on board to continue moving and, you know, wanting to move forward, but I think both sides are waiting on Bob at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So when we look at the timeline for this project, public information, a public campaign is supposed to start around June. Scott, do you see a concern if we had to for June and possibly July with our initial discussions saying, here's our project and it may include this if we're still waiting on an answer?
I mean, I guess, you know, ultimately that's going to be your call, but I think if you know, obviously you want to start getting the information out to the public and you want to start talking about the project. I think going out and explaining that this is what we're looking to do. And we're also trying to do this other thing, the flood mitigation at Townsend. And we'd like to combine all of those together, but we're still working on that piece when trying to secure the funding for that. So I guess it's really, how comfortable is the district with that kind of message going out to the public? I mean, I think if you're forthright about it and you just explain what you're going through, you know, I was told a long time ago, if you tell the truth every time, you don't really have to worry about what you're saying. So I think if you just put it out there, the public would understand that, I would think.
I just shared here the timeline. So we would be presenting to the board in May just to present to the entire board the proposed project scope. And then it's not on here, but basically June and July, August would be when we would try to phase out a public information campaign. The only real official action that has to take place, again, is the seeker in July and August. And I think you said the board would have to vote on the project by a date in September, Scott?
Yeah, so the schedule that you've got up there is the schedule that I think Christine put together a while back. Yes. The other schedule that I have, I don't know if you want me to bring that up. I could maybe show that. Okay, let me try it here now. Share here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I have on this schedule that we would do the public information campaign, you know, sort of June through September. And then because this project would be a type 2 action relative to seeker, really there's not a waiting period for that. So you could have, you could declare yourself lead agency and say there's no impacts and have that resolution the same board meeting, the same night that you also then authorize to go out to referendum. So the latest date you could do that and hit we had originally talked about a referendum vote of November 17th. If you held to that schedule, then the latest you could do that, those two board actions would be September 29th. There's a 45 to 49 day period between when you do those actions and when you can have the vote. Obviously, if you push the vote out till December, then that date could even slide a little bit further into October. But you could also do the seeker a little earlier if you wanted to, but you don't have to. That's your call on that. I've worked with many districts on where it's a type 2 like this. They've done them at the same time. They've done the resolution on seeker and say that there's no impact, and then they did the referendum resolution right after that.
But in any event, Scott, we'd be running out to the public. We'd be talking to the public about this. We'd be campaigning it during the summer, yes, even before those votes went yes, formalized. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of hard for me, honestly, to put a date on when we should go on this right now. I'm hoping here by the end of May, at least, we would have an idea of what's going to go on with the society and with this COVID stuff, because I don't think this is something we want to do completely electronic. I think being able to have some of the charts that you had and the sketches and things that are up and be able to do this face-to-face and publicly is going to go a long way with explaining the whole deal, that we want to do both, but we're going to focus on the Townsend High School, and if they're not Townsend, but if the high school side of it, and then if Townsend can come along, awesome, we're going to incorporate that in there. But it does make me nervous to do something in November as a vote and wait till September to make it public, because I would rather that window is a little open so people feel that we're very comfortable and we're taking our time with bringing it to the vote. I don't want them to feel rushed, because that was a lot that we heard last project, was that they felt rushed, you know what I mean? And I just, maybe that's being too cautious. I don't know, but I would really like to go slow on that. And, you know, if we got started in July and August would be awesome. I'm just not sure, with business being the way it is and everything right now, the uncertainty on if we dare to set them dates now.
What would your thoughts be about leaving this meeting with, one, a priority on Bob Schofield and trying to move that forward, and two, tentatively looking at presenting the project scope to the entire board at the second meeting in May? So there wouldn't be any formal action by the board in May, but we would have another month under our belts to know where we're at, and we could just bring them up to speed with the project we're looking at, and then decide from there how soon we want to start a public campaign.
I think that's a good idea, because I think getting it to the board, and I think we could slowly start getting it public a little bit by letting it out. This is what we're looking at. This is what we're looking at. You know what I mean? And I have no issues with that at all, trying to make it public of these are things we're considering.
I think now that we have an option that's closer, that we can actually show to people on paper, I think it's a good time to roll that out.
And keep in mind, this is live streamed as well, so it is getting, the information is definitely getting out to the public.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the rest of our board's seeing it on live stream too, so we gotta get it in front of everybody.
Right.
So Scott, that meeting date would be May 19th.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think that covers everything on that large capital project for the moment until we start talking about an EPC, unless anybody has any other questions or comments on that.
Just one thing. Scott, is that something that you can have one of the, like a trifold, one of the boards put together to where we could leave that maybe displayed someplace in the school, in one of the offices or something like that, just so that it's a picture of the project out there again, just as a visual
of the parking lot?
Yeah, after you do the.
Yeah. So typically what we would do is we like to put together some boards that you can put in the lobbies of all your buildings with kind of highlighting what the project would entail. So you could have that sketch of the parking lot, and then you could also color the roof areas that are going to be replaced. Then you could have notations that say, we're replacing these roof areas. And we also sometimes like to put pictures in as well that show some of the issues that you're dealing with. So like you could show on the roof, you could show some issues of, here's roofs that the roof is failing in this area or whatever. So there's things like that we can put together. Yeah, we would certainly do that. We would just need to know when you would want those to be displayed so that we have a few weeks to pull that together.
We could also post that stuff on the digital signage. That's
yes,
at the
absolutely.
of all the buildings, as well as our website and other social media.
Yep.
Are you, Kevin, looking to have something available for our board meeting that we're talking about in May, so the rest of the board can see this?
That's what I was thinking, but I don't know if I'm rushing it. That was just a thought that was kind of what I was leaning to. Yes.
Is that too soon, Scott?
I definitely think we should do that.
That's a month lead time.
Yeah, if you want to have something for the board meeting, just it's just editing that drawing. That's easy to do. Yep, that's not a problem.
Because I think as much as you can have that way detailed, like you just explained to us, would go a long ways and that.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, energy performance. Poor John is sitting in his office and I don't think he can talk. So, I mean, he can talk, but we can't hear him. So there were technical difficulties he's having. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, it wouldn't load the meeting when I first got here. I tried to get on like 2 minutes of 5 and it wouldn't do it. Must be the internet was down, wasn't it, Rick?
So when we left our last meeting, we were going to try to dig deeper into some energy performance contract stuff. John and I worked with both the ECG group and Trane, and they both did an independent evaluation of what they thought an energy performance contract would look like for the district. Last week, we spoke with ECG, and based on their review, they said that given the amount the district spends on utilities and heating and things like that, they estimated that a project size, they look at how much you spend, how much they think you could save, and then determine what size project that could support. So they said based on their review, they thought it would support roughly $750,000 project, $750,000, which when it comes to these projects is a fairly small project. We had talked to them initially. So ECG is an engineer architect. So they would be basically the district representative, but someone else is doing the project. Trane is a company that actually does the work. They do these projects. When we first spoke to ECG, we explained to them the Trane scenario about how they've already been procured through US Communities and the district could piggyback on that without having to do our own competitive process. They weren't initially excited about that idea, but then when they reviewed our data, they said, A, given the new COVID-19 environment and the small size of the project, we may actually want to consider going that route because if we do an energy performance contract, because they didn't think we would necessarily get a lot of bidders on our project. Yesterday, John and I had a conference call with Trane, and they went in a little deeper. They came back with a project that was a little higher. It was $1,048,000, right, John?
Yes.
And they identified some different energy performance measures where they thought they could save money. It included lighting. It included a thermostat for some of our refrigeration equipment. It included some like weather stripping around our main entrances to help with heating and cooling costs. John, what else was in there? Oh, the controls, the
DDC system that controls all our heat and lighting. We have a very antiquated system here that's, you know, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's very outdated. And then there was also the building envelope sealing around the roof structures, because they feel that we're losing, especially in the middle school, a tremendous amount of conditioned air, whether it be heat or cooled air.
So we had that conference call yesterday. He actually emailed us the written report today, this afternoon, which I forwarded to Scott, and Scott had a little time to take a look at. And I can forward it all out to the committee. I just like this afternoon. I've not really studied numbers yet, but the overall, they show that the project, the savings fund project, have positive cash flow to the district. Scott had some comments based on what he saw for the cash flow about why we might want to do this as an EPC versus part of the capital project. Scott, do you want to chime in on that and try to explain it to the group?
Sure. I think one of the attachments that Meg sent around was an article that I wrote for NISCOS a couple years ago. And all it was trying to do was to sort of point out the differences between a capital project and an EPC and whether it would make sense to do work one way or the other. And they both have their place. And what I saw in looking at, and I didn't spend, we just got this late this afternoon, so I haven't poured over it in detail, but when I was looking at their financial projections, they had it spelled out, years 1 through years 18. And the energy the savings you would see in the project versus the lease payments that you would actually be paying to train, the project was a net, it wasn't a net savings. You were actually a loss still. You only became positive when you added in the state aid for the project. So when you added the state aid in, you had a net positive over the project lifespan. So my comment to Meg and to John was, if you did that same work as part of a capital project and did not do it through an EPC, not only would you see the state aid savings, you also would not be making that lease payment. So you would see the full savings in the capital project. And I think when you look at the paper that Meg sent out that I wrote, there's an example in there that kind of talks about that. And so, I think that's something to think about. But it's certainly not the only factor. The other thing I noticed in their report when I was looking through it, their largest energy saving measure was to replace all of the lighting with LED lighting, which is absolutely true. That would be the biggest energy savings, but they did not include in that estimate replacement of any of the ceilings. They're just going in and replacing the lighting fixtures, which is what I've seen pretty typically with energy performance contractors. They just replace the lights and leave the ceiling alone. The issue that I see with that is there's twofold. You have a lot of older ceilings in the high school, middle school. There's quite a few of them that are concealed spline ceilings, which means they're fastened to the substrate above. So if you want to run cabling or run any kind of things above the ceiling, you can't do that with concealed spline ceiling. And they're also, so putting in a new ceiling and new lights with a drop-in system would give you more flexibility for future maintenance and wiring of the building. And I also think it would make the building more attractive. When you're walking down the corridors, you'd have nice new ceilings, nice lighting. It would give a refresh to the building. I've seen that quite often in projects where we've done new ceilings and lightings. It really does give a nice aesthetic improvement to the overall building. So those were just some things that I saw from looking at it quickly this afternoon.
So I haven't had a chance to take Scott's comments and really digest it. Scott, I guess my question to you is, if we decided we wanted to pursue some of these and achieve the savings, what would the process be to try and go about incorporating some of this into the capital project scope?
Well, so you would just add those items in. So for example, you would do a line item where you would add replacement of all the lighting and the ceilings. You would add that line into the project. Now, obviously, the cost would increase from what we're talking about now. But you would just add that scope of the work in. So you'd replace all the lighting and you'd replace the ceilings. The ceiling around the perimeter of the building, you would just add that scope into the project. You would describe that and show where that's to occur and put it into the project documents.
Is the cost, if you do the ceiling, going to make it a lot more expensive than what they projected for just the lighting?
I didn't get a chance to run like a square foot number to see what they had in there for the lighting. I can look at that. That's the way I would kind of tell that, because when we look at replacing ceilings and lightings, we kind of look at it as a square foot estimate. How much square footage of ceilings do you have? And then we know the ceilings are this much to replace. We know the lighting is X amount to replace. And so we know it's so much per square foot. I'd have to look at what their lighting number is and kind of make it apples to apples, but I could do that.
And I could get a good solid figure of square footage in the next day or two and get that to you. And you know,
I have the square footage of your ceilings. I know what the square footage of that is.
Of the spline of the old spline ceilings.
Yeah, we have that number.
Oh, okay.
Because we looked at that previously. I do have that number. What I was saying is what I don't know is Trane is showing lighting, their cost for that. Let's see, where did they have it? Somewhere in their proposal. I'm just looking here. Well, whatever. Okay, they had a cost, you know, designated for the lighting itself, and we would have to compare that. How much lighting are they replacing, and what's that equate to? I'd have to find
another good thing with by testing the spline ceiling for asbestos, we found out that the mastic is negative.
In those rooms, correct?
Yeah, and it's the exact same stuff. It's a homogeneous area.
Yeah, the only thing I would recommend is if we were going to say replace, because there's quite a bit of concealed spline ceiling in that building. We would want to take a few more tests randomly, just to
without
confirm.
a doubt.
Yeah.
I just forwarded that. I'm sorry, Rhonda, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when you do have the opportunity, is that something that you can share with us?
I just sent it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Christine, do you have any thoughts or comments as far as when we look at the cost of the project, if we were to include this, how that would affect things? So obviously the project would go up, the state aid would go up. Is there a way to incorporate in your estimate for the financing of the project what we're going to project in utility savings and how that will help make the project budget neutral or fund a portion of it?
Right. So that's exactly the key when we look at it being incorporated into the capital project. Is now we would need to have a value for what the savings are to be able to apply, as you said, so that it shows that it's a net neutral. So that is something that typically, Scott, I don't know if you have engineers on staff that could give an estimate based on what work you're looking at, or if you're comfortable enough that the work is identical to what Train has proposed, such that we can just take those savings numbers and set into the schedule. It's something we would certainly need from an engineering firm to know that we have solid savings numbers, or at least solid estimates, obviously.
Yeah, we'd have to look at that and see, just to confirm that. I'm assuming Train's numbers are pretty good, but, we'd want to confirm that.
Okay.
Christine,
And
I just
so
sent
that-
the
and that-
report to you too.
Thank you very much. I will look through that. And so, to your point, Meg, that's exactly what we would need. We would just need a number that the district is comfortable with to drop in as far as what the operating savings will be. And then that would need to be communicated to the community that we're going to include this scope of ceiling and lights and whatever else might be included. The operating savings is estimated to be, let's just say it's, $10,000 a year. And that savings we're going to apply to the debt service to help to keep the project to remain at a tax neutral from where you are today.
So just to let everybody know, I'm going back and looking at our building condition survey. We had estimated back in 2014 that to replace all of the fixtures in the high school, middle school with LEDs would be about a little over 700,000. And Train's got about 560 in their numbers right now, which doesn't surprise me because LED fixtures have come down in price quite a bit over the last few years. So I'm not surprised at that. So that's probably a pretty good number. I would guesstimate that's just for the lights. Now the ceilings, we had another, let's see, back in 2014, we had about $183,000 to replace the ceilings. I'd have to double check that number again, but that's about how much more additional that would cost. But we would want to put together a line item by line item of, if you were going to do these things, here's what we would recommend, or these are what our estimate would be for that.
So my thought is to move forward and continue to look at the Train proposal and wade through it. At the same time, have Scott look at some figures for us of what it would look like to incorporate this in the capital project, and then just try to compare the two the next time we meet and see which direction we think we should go with that. Would it be reasonable to try and, do we have another facilities committee meeting scheduled?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't think so.
I'm not aware of one.
Would it be reasonable to try to meet before May 19th to discuss that, so then we can decide whether that was part of the project we were going to present to the board or not?
I would say
I have on the calendar that I have a facilities meeting May 14th. Yeah.
I do too. Yes, I see that now. So we could, is that too little time, Scott, if we met on the 14th to say, yes, we want to include this, or no, we don't, to then have information ready to present to the board on the 19th?
No, I don't think so. I mean, because we would do all the estimating between now and then, so we could have it all together and show, here's the two options, because it's really, you're going to do it versus an EPC, or here's what we would recommend. Here's what the cost would be if you added it to the project. I could kind of have that all ready almost.
I do like the idea of trying to manage one project rather than having two things going on.
And if our benefits are really in the state aid side, then it makes sense to go on to capital with it.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's where we're actually going positive, then we might as well get that credit in the state aid and control that process in order to have that happen.
It certainly looks that way from if you look at page 22 of that document that was sent out.
I can try to
where they
pull it
the
up.
breakdown. And when you look at the, they show their costs there. They show what the annual lease payments are, what the project savings are, and it's a negative number. And then when you add in the state aid, then it becomes positive. So that's, to me, that looks like that's what you're looking at is.
So
I agree
Scott,
with that.
can you show them on this what you're talking about?
So if you look at the bottom 3 lines that are in green kind of, you'll see, or actually the bottom 2 lines in green, it says annual lease payments, like just look at that first column, it says 94,290. That's what you're paying Trane. And then that year, and then you're saving 70,391 that year. So you've got a negative cost, negative savings. But then the state aid right below that comes in at 61,355. So that shows a net positive to the district at the end of the day of 37,455. If you weren't paying that annual lease payment, you'd be getting state aid of, and the numbers might be slightly different, but it would be in that ballpark. You'd be getting that $60,000 of state aid plus the $70,000 of energy savings, if that number is in fact a real hard, accurate number. So you'd actually be a net positive of 130,000, not 37,000.
Hey, Scott, would we be able to chase any like NYSERDA incentives with this, or is that already incorporated with energy performance contracts?
I think they talked about that in their proposal, that this was not including energy or NYSERDA
incentives. Yeah,
right.
But they were going to be looking for that as well.
Sure. Yeah, I would assume that we would look for it as well. I mean,
right.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's up to the energy performance contract company to secure those grants.
They did have this sheet where there's a column that says possible incentives. I don't know if they were from NYSERDA or a different source.
It would probably have to be NYSERDA, I would say.
So it looks like they've taken that off the top to then get to the $1,040,000. They took off almost $40,000 of incentives to then get to the $1,048,000.
Yeah.
And the thing is, whether we do it through a performance contract or through a capital project, you still go through the national co-ops for, equipment and labor rates.
Well, if you were doing this as part of a capital, you would more than likely bid this. I mean, some of this you might be able to do through state contract, but the lighting upgrades, for example, that would be bid to a general contractor to do that, with an electrical contractor doing the lighting, general contractor doing the ceilings.
But don't the general contractors also use the co-ops?
No, they wouldn't use that. It depends on how we set up the overall project, but typically they would not. No, they're using their, when you put this out to public bid, they're giving you a quote using their forces based on prevailing wage, not the co-op pricing.
So John, the only co-op pricing that we probably would go after is controls and possible Trane equipment, so that the district can get exactly what they want. Which is what's nice about the co-op agreement, which is a maximum price agreement. They can give you a lower price if they want, but it's a max price. And if you bid the project, if you have competitive bidding, it's typically better than your maximum price allowed, especially for lighting, because you're not dead set on what exact light fixture you want.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So if we're comfortable kind of keeping a pin in the EPC project idea, but looking at what it looks like incorporated with a capital project and reconvening on the 14th, I think we can move ahead with that.
And we should be able to send you out something sooner than that so you can see it before the meeting and digest it.
That would be great.
That's 2 elements, though, right, Scott? Because we're also talking about those printed pieces that Kevin was chatting about earlier to have for the board, and that's right about that same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. And
Yeah,
Scott, I'm sorry, Scott,
go ahead.
Christine, if you have it available in advance, also the cost estimates, just so I can rerun the numbers for everyone so they can see what that looks like on the 14th also.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get it out to everybody.
Thank you very much.
That would definitely be very helpful if we could compare adding this, I think, is the energy performance contract, instead of doing that, adding that to our capital and be able to compare those numbers to the numbers that you have without that as just a straight capital. Would definitely go a long way with helping decisions.
Well, the other thing
Absolutely.
that's nice about doing, lighting and energy saving things like this, it's very nice to, when you're putting the project out to the public, you're doing all things here that need to be done, and you're saving energy. Those are all good things to be doing, prudent things to be doing.
Well, the biggest thing that I like out of it, honestly, is that we're not going out with this with the intent that in 5-6 years we're going to try to come back to them with another project. We could kind of have things grouped up in here and do a lot and have it done for a while, hopefully.
Right.
Now, Scott, the only negative to this, to roll it into a capital project, would be that we wouldn't have the company such as Trane or whoever guaranteeing us our savings, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if it doesn't work out, we don't have any recourse.
No, but the other way to look at that is, the biggest energy savings that they have in their proposal is the new lighting.
Right.
Well, if you replace that lighting with efficient LED lighting, you are going to see those savings.
Yeah.
It's not like you're not going to see those savings.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And we've explored in other meetings, I think, too, in the past, too, that it's pretty hard to hold them to their guarantee because there's always going to be some loophole someplace.
Yeah. And, the thing I like about it so much is replacing, all that old equipment, that's 1959 vintage.
Right.
The electrical, the transformers and stuff like that. We could have a $100,000 worth of transformers go, or 200,000, tomorrow, just like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we've covered everything on the agenda, unless there are anything anyone else wants to add. It's been a long meeting, but I think we did a good job regrouping and moving forward. So I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda. Glad everybody was here.
Yeah.
What's
Took
that,
me a
Rhonda?
while, but I got here.
Rhonda, did I miss what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Guess we're all set then.
Okay.
All right.
Everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Stay healthy.
See ya.
Talk to you
Everybody.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.